The scariest thing in life is losing someone you're supposed to protect, especially a child. That fear, it grabs you by the throat, squeezes until you can't think straight. And for me, it all started with that damn teddy bear. Wacky's World of Toys wasn't somewhere I wanted to be, but my niece, Lily, loved it. It was one of those over-the-top, flashy stores designed to mess with your head. The lights were too bright, the music too loud. Everything moved fast and dizzying, like it was trying to overwhelm you on purpose. Lily was running wild, bouncing from one aisle to the next, her laughter cutting through the noise. I followed her, trying to keep my head straight, but something wasn't right. I could feel it the second we walked in, and then I saw it, sitting on a low shelf in the far corner of the teddy bear aisle. A dirty, ragged thing with matted fur, patches missing, and one of its arms torn clean off. My stomach tightened. Why would a store keep something that broken on display? It gnawed at me. That bear wasn't just a toy, it felt like a warning, a trap. But Lily didn't care. She was lost in her own little world, tearing through the doll section like nothing else existed. I couldn't shake it, though. I picked up the bear, feeling the coldness of its fabric seep into my skin. The weight of it wasn't right, too heavy for something so small. Its eyes were off too, bulging in a way that made my pulse quicken. I knew I should have left it there, but I didn't. I marched to the front of the store, gripping the bear tight as if it would run if I let go. The cashier, this dumb jock with an empty stare, just shrugged when I tried to show him. Not my problem, he mumbled, barely looking up. He didn't care. No one else in the store seemed to notice the bear at all, but it noticed me. Shaking my head, I left it on the counter and turned back to find Lily. That's when the music stopped. Just like that, the flashing lights around me dimmed, and the aisles grew longer, stretching out like I was in some sort of maze. The bright, dizzying chaos had collapsed into suffocating silence, and I felt like I was the only person left in that cursed store. "Lily?" My voice cracked. I started running, heart pounding, hands slick with sweat. And then I found her, but my relief was short-lived. She was standing at the far end of the aisle, her back to me, frozen. Her hands were gripping something. The bear. How did she get it? Why was she holding it? The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I approached her. "Lily!" She didn't turn, didn't speak. Just stared ahead, clutching the bear tighter, her tiny fingers digging into its filthy fur. I knelt beside her, shaking. "Lily, let's go!" She slowly turned toward me, her eyes wide, glassy. I reached for her, but she pulled back, clutching the bear closer to her chest. And then, in the dead silence of that aisle, I heard it. A growl. Low, guttural, coming from the bear. My breath caught in my throat and my feet rooted to the ground. It was cold, freezing cold, like a vacuum of air had swallowed us both. The bear's mouth curled into a twisted grin. Its button eyes, lifeless yet somehow full of malice, glinted in the dim light. It was alive. I wanted to scream, to grab Lily and run, but I was frozen. A moment later, the growling stopped. The bear's eyes flicked up toward me, and everything went black. I woke up in my bed, the sheets soaked with sweat, heart hammering in my chest. I blinked, trying to remember how we'd gotten home, but my mind was blank. I stumbled out of bed, checking on Lily. She was still asleep in the room down the hall, clutching the bear tight. The bear. It was in the house. I couldn't let her keep it. I rushed in, trying to pry it from her hands, but her grip was like iron. "No!" she screamed, jerking awake, eyes wild and frantic. "I need it!" I stepped back, heart pounding. "Lily? It's just a toy." She shook her head, clutching it tighter. Her voice was soft, distant. "He said if I let go, he'll take me again." "Again?" I felt my blood run cold. She wouldn't explain any further, just turned away, holding the bear like her life depended on it. That's when the knocking started. 3 slow knocks at the door. Deep. Echoing through the house. It was midnight. No one knocks at midnight. I froze, staring down the hall toward the front door. Lily didn't move. Her breath came out slow, controlled, like she was waiting for something. Knock. 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 I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped toward the door. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle, pulling it open a crack. Cold air hit me, but there was no one there. Just the empty street and the sound of wind howling through the trees. Then, from behind me, Lily's voice. "He's here." Things spiraled after that. Every night, the knocking grew louder. Every day, Lily grew quieter, more distant. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My house, once my safe space, became a prison. The bear's growls haunted me in the dark, creeping into my dreams, pulling me into nightmares I couldn't escape. And Lily? She wouldn't let the bear go. It was like it had a hold on her. Its claws sunk deep into her mind. I had to end this. I grabbed the bear when she was asleep, rushed it outside, and tossed it into a bonfire in the backyard. The flames licked at its fur, curling and blackening it. And for a moment, I thought it was over. But then I heard it. That same growl. From behind me in the house, I whipped around and there it was, sitting in the window, staring at me with its cold, dead eyes perfectly intact. I fell to my knees, my mind spinning, knowing deep down that I couldn't fight it. This wasn't just a toy. It was something else, and it wasn't going to stop. I brought in a paranormal investigator, someone who supposedly dealt with these kinds of things. He took one look at the bear and paled. "This isn't a normal haunting," he said, shaking his head. "This is something much darker, ancient. It doesn't want to scare you. It wants to take her." I felt like my heart had stopped. "Take her?" He nodded. "And it's not going to stop until it does." There was only one option left. Go back to the store. Find the source of whatever had taken root in that bear. But when I got there, the store was gone. No sign of it. No one remembered it ever being there. I stood in the empty lot, staring at the dirt, feeling reality slip away. I was running out of time, and the bear knew it. Lily was slipping further, her eyes empty, her voice barely a whisper. That night I heard it again, the knocking, but this time when I opened the door it wasn't empty. The bear was there, waiting. It smiled at me, and for the first time, I knew exactly what it wanted. Story 2. We were stupid, like the kind of dumb that makes you break into an abandoned toy store because there's nothing better to do in a dead-end town. Of course, it was Charlie's idea. It's always Charlie's idea when things go wrong. Me and Tim? We just went along. Saturday night, a few beers down, and boredom pushing us to make terrible choices. The place was a legendary 4th Street toy store. Closed down after some accident. People whispered about missing kids, but no one ever gave the full story. We didn't believe any of it. If anything, that made it more exciting. Prove everyone wrong, right? Except when we broke in, the place was worse than I imagined. Dust hung in the air like a thick fog, and every step stirred it up, making it hard to breathe. The shelves were tipped over, toys scattered across the floor, some broken beyond recognition. It was a battlefield, forgotten and left to rot. But as messed up as everything was, right there in the middle of the wreckage sat a dollhouse. Not just any dollhouse. This thing was pristine, perfect, untouched by time. It didn't belong here. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something about that dollhouse wasn't right. It was too clean, too perfect. Everything inside it was just so, like someone had set it up moments before we walked in. But Charlie, being Charlie, laughed and kicked open its tiny door like this was some prank. He thought maybe we'd find hidden money or something stupid, but inside, just tiny furniture, perfectly arranged, waiting. Tim, who had been quiet the whole time, started staring at the dollhouse. At first, I thought he was just zoning out like he sometimes did. But then, he was gone. Just like that. No sound, no warning. 1 second he was there, and the next, nothing. Me and Charlie panicked. We tore through the store, yelling his name, flipping over shelves, shoving toys aside, hoping he was hiding as a joke. But the place was silent. Too silent. The air felt heavy, pressing down on my chest. That's when I saw it, inside the dollhouse. On one of the tiny chairs sat a little figure, a doll. It had Tim's face, the same clothes, the same shaggy hair, the same dumb expression. My mouth went dry. I couldn't move. That wasn't possible. Charlie snapped me out of it, cursing, yelling at me to stop staring, but I couldn't. The doll's eyes seemed to follow me, its mouth twisted into a strange smile. I reached out, thinking I could just grab it, fix everything. But the second I touched it, my hand stuck. It was like the wood was alive, clinging to my skin, pulling me toward the dollhouse. A strange buzzing filled my ears, growing louder and louder. I yanked my hand back, my heart racing. When I looked again, the little Tim doll was gone. But that pit in my stomach, it was still there. Something was very wrong. Charlie didn't wait. He grabbed a chair and swung at the dollhouse, smashing it with everything he had. But the chair splintered on impact, the dollhouse completely untouched. His eyes widened with panic. He swung again, harder this time, but nothing. Not even a dent. I could see the fear creeping into his face, the tough guy facade cracking. We were screwed. We ran. We didn't look back. I didn't care where we were going, as long as it was away from that store. My lungs burned as we sprinted down the street, the cold night air biting at my skin. When we finally stopped, hunched over and gasping for breath, it felt like the world had started moving again. But the weight of what happened stayed with us. Tim was still missing. The next morning, when the cops came, we didn't say a word about the dollhouse. Who would believe us? They wouldn't have. Missing kid, abandoned toy store? It was just another small-town mystery to them. They didn't find him. But I knew, deep down, Tim was still in there. Days passed, and Charlie tried to act like it didn't bother him, but I knew better. He had that look in his eyes, the same look I had, the kind you get when something's gnawing at the back of your mind, eating away at your sanity. He stopped sleeping too, so did I. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see the dollhouse, perfect and pristine. And Tim, inside, staring out, his face blank, like he was waiting for me. A week later, Charlie showed up at my place. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his face pale and drawn. "I've been dreaming about it too," he said. "The dollhouse. It's calling us back." I didn't want to go. Hell, every bone in my body screamed not to. But it was like the dollhouse had a hook in me, dragging me back. I knew we couldn't leave it alone. We grabbed flashlights, crowbars, and headed back to the toy store. Big mistake! The toy store felt different this time. The air was colder, the dust thicker, the shelves seemed taller, the toys darker somehow. But the dollhouse, it had moved. No longer in the middle of the room, it was now sitting by the register, almost hidden in the shadows, like it had been waiting for us. Charlie didn't waste any time. He marched up, crowbar in hand, ready to destroy it once and for all. But when he raised the crowbar, the air grew heavy. So heavy it felt like we were being crushed. My lungs struggled for air, and I could see the terror in Charlie's eyes. And then we heard it. Tim's voice, soft but clear. "Help me." It wasn't coming from the dollhouse. It was all around us, bouncing off the walls, echoing in my skull. My legs turned to jelly, and I couldn't move. My flashlight flickered, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own. Charlie swung the crowbar, but it was useless. The dollhouse shimmered like it wasn't even real. His crowbar passed right through it. And then we heard footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from behind us. We whipped around, but no one was there. The store was silent, save for the creaking floorboards beneath our feet. But the feeling, something was there, watching. I grabbed Charlie's arm, ready to bolt, but the exit was gone. The door we came through, now a solid wall. My heart raced. We were trapped. The dollhouse started to glow. A soft, eerie light leaked from its tiny windows, casting an unnatural glow on the floor. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. It was pulling me in again, just like before. Charlie screamed. I turned just in time to see the floor beneath him shift. It rippled like water, pulling him down. His hand shot out, grabbing at the air, but it was no use. The store was swallowing him whole. His eyes locked on mine, filled with terror. And then, he was gone.
The dollhouse glowed brighter, almost blinding now, the only thing left in the room. I heard Charlie's voice, faint, coming from inside. I knew what I had to do, but I was too scared to move, too scared to try.
And then everything went black. I woke up in the street, alone. No sign of Charlie, no sign of the dollhouse. I stumbled home, dazed, unsure if it was real or some horrible dream. But I knew better. It was real. A week later, I went back to the toy store. It was boarded up again like it had been before. No sign of what happened, but I can feel it deep down. The dollhouse is still there, waiting for me, calling me back. I can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. The dollhouse, glowing in the dark, perfect and pristine, always waiting. I know, sooner or later, I'll have to go back. But this time, I won't make it out. Story 3. I should have left the second I saw that clown doll sitting there, grinning like it knew something I didn't. The place was dead. No life, no movement, just stale, choking air that felt thick with dust and neglect. Locking up after hours always gave me the creeps. But that night, something was wrong. The whole store felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. It started with a laugh, high-pitched, twisted, and wrong. I froze in the middle of the aisle, my keys halfway into my pocket, wondering if I'd imagined it. But there it was again, like it was coming from the shelves themselves. My pulse quickened, each beat like a hammer in my chest. I scanned the store, expecting to see the same rows of dolls, action figures, and stuffed animals staring back at me like always. But then I saw it.
There, on the top shelf, in the far corner of the toy section, was a clown doll. It wasn't just any clown doll. Its paint was cracked. The colors faded as though it had been sitting there for decades.
Its glassy eyes were too big, bulging unnaturally from its head. It wore a faded red nose and shoes far too large, but it wasn't the appearance that sent a chill down my spine. It was the fact that it hadn't been there before. I knew every inch of that store, every toy in inventory. That clown wasn't part of it, I was sure of it. My skin crawled. Every instinct screamed at me to leave it alone, to turn away and forget I'd ever seen it. But I couldn't. My hands moved on their own, like something was pulling me toward it. As my fingers wrapped around its cold wooden limbs, I felt a jolt, a sharp electric pulse that shot through me and settled deep in my gut. I recoiled, but it was too late. I was holding the doll now, its eyes locked onto mine, and something about it felt alive. Damn it, Jake, I muttered to myself, shaking my head. Jake was going to love this. He lived for stuff like this, for creeping me out with stupid pranks. But this felt different, too real, too wrong. I threw the doll into the backroom trash bin, hoping that would be the end of it. But the moment I stepped back into the main area, I heard it again. The laugh. Only this time, it wasn't distant. It was close. Right behind me. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest. Nothing. Just empty shelves and rows of toys. The store felt colder now, and the air was thick, pressing down on me like it wanted me out. My palms were slick with sweat as I grabbed my phone and called Jake. He picked up on the second ring, his voice light, teasing. "Scared of a toy, huh?" He chuckled, clearly amused. "Come on, man, you're losing it." "I'm serious, Jake. You need to get down here." There was a pause on the other end, and then Jake's tone changed, the laughter fading. All right. I'll be there in 10. I didn't even want to wait that long. I started pacing, trying to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the store. The toys, the stuffed animals, they all seemed to be watching me now, their plastic eyes tracking my every movement. The air smelled like burnt plastic, and there was a faint buzzing, like an old fluorescent light flickering somewhere in the distance. I couldn't calm down. Jake finally swaggered in, smirking as he always did. His presence usually made me feel better. His carefree attitude had a way of lightening the mood. But tonight, it didn't work. Something about his grin felt out of place, like he didn't understand the weight of the situation. He walked to the back room whistling as he went and disappeared behind the door. Minutes passed. Too many minutes. My pulse quickened. "Jake," I called. But there was no response. I walked toward the back, my legs heavy, like I was wading through thick, invisible sludge. The store felt wrong, silent in a way that pressed into my ears, making my head throb. The trash bin was overturned, its contents spilled out across the floor, and the clown doll gone. "Jake!" I called again, louder this time, my voice echoing against the walls. The back door was slightly ajar, swaying as though someone had just gone through it in a hurry. My mind raced, but my body was frozen. I tried to take a step toward the door, but I couldn't. I turned back to the front of the store, hoping maybe Jake was messing with me, hiding somewhere to jump out and laugh in my face. But the store was empty, as silent and dead as before. I made my way to the security monitors, fingers trembling as I rewound the footage. Nothing. There was no footage of Jake walking into the back room. No footage of me tossing the clown into the bin. The only thing on the screen was me, pacing, looking around like an idiot, alone. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed my phone, dialing the police, but I knew how it would sound. Like I'd lost my mind. When they arrived, they didn't find Jake. There was no sign of the clown doll, no evidence of anything unusual. Just me, standing there confused, and the store silent as a tomb. Yaki was gone. 2 weeks passed, and the store shut down. Chains on the door. No explanation, just silence. Jake's mom showed up at the station every day asking for updates, but there were none. He had vanished without a trace, and everyone in town acted like it was just another weird thing to happen in a dead-end place like this. But I knew better. The laugh came back. I heard it one night when I was walking home, faint but unmistakable. It trailed after me, lurking in the shadows, following me even as I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things, that the stress of losing Jake was messing with my head. But when I told Travis about it, he just laughed, dumb jock. He always thought I was too jumpy, too easy to mess with. "Let's go check it out," he said, like it was no big deal. "You're just scared of a toy, man. Come on, I'll prove it to you." I didn't want to go back to that store, but something inside me pulled me there. Like the laugh was calling me, dragging me back. I followed Travis, dread pooling in my gut, with every step we took. When we got there, the door was chained up like before, but Travis found a broken window, big enough to squeeze through. As soon as we were inside, the air felt suffocating, thicker than I remembered, like the dust had become a living thing, wrapping around us, pressing into our lungs. And there, in the middle of the floor, was the clown doll. It sat perfectly upright, as though it had been waiting for us. Its eyes glinted in the faint moonlight filtering through the broken window. Travis, being the idiot he was, picked it up, laughing like it was all some big joke. But then, the lights flickered. The doll's eyes shifted, following him, and I felt that sickening twist in my stomach again. My body was screaming at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Travis tossed the doll onto the floor, and it landed perfectly upright again, staring. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but when I pulled it out, the camera wouldn't focus. The screen glitched, static cutting in and out. The laugh was back, louder now, echoing through the aisles, bouncing off the shelves, filling the air with that twisted, high-pitched sound. Travis's bravado faded. He tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The windows, our only exit, were sealed tight, as if the store had come alive, trapping us inside. The laugh echoed again, and I felt it, deep inside my skull, like it was drilling into my mind. The lights went out, plunging us into total darkness. I gripped a broken piece of shelving, my knuckles white, waiting for something, anything to happen. Then the doll appeared, right in front of us, its grin wider, its eyes gleaming in the dark. Travis collapsed, clutching his head, screaming as the laugh pounded into his brain. We had to get out. I grabbed Travis by the arm, dragging him toward the door as fast as I could, and just like that, the door swung open. We bolted into the night without looking back, but the laugh followed us, faint but constant. Even as we made it down the street, I could still hear it, whispering in the back of my mind. Travis didn't remember anything the next day, but he refused to talk about it. He looked different, like something had broken inside him. He stopped sleeping, stopped going out. Me. I'm stuck with that same sense of dread I felt the night Jake disappeared. The doll is still out there, waiting. 2 weeks later, I got a text. No number, no name, just a picture of the clown doll sitting on my doorstep. The caption read, "See you soon.